Hello everyone, my name is Kumar and welcome back to our channel KUMAR Programming. This is the 31st part of this series where we are building an e-commerce project as online switch store in Next.js 15 and React 19. In our today's session, we are going to implement Google authentication in our Next.js application by using auth.js. And by the end of this tutorial, you will have a fully functional login system powered by Google OAuth. Since we have already implemented our credential provider, so it would be quite easy to implement our Google provider as well. And we will implement it step by step by using our documentation provided by auth.js. Now let me quickly show you at the end of the session how our application will be able to authenticate through Google provider. So here we have our application, and once user will click on sign in, here we have now two options. The first one is for the credential. User can provide their email ID and password and they can sign in. Or the second option, they can sign in with the Google provider. And once user will click on sign in with Google button, then it will redirect to the Google authentication screen. And here user can authenticate by providing their Gmail ID, right? And once user will click here, then they have to provide their password and click on next. Now it will redirect to our application dashboard. So see here, now we have authenticated with our Google provider. And if you see here, now we are able to see our name and email address, right? And once user will sign out, then simply it will sign out and user can sign in once again. As well as I'll show you that how the data is being stored inside our user and account table for our Google provider. All right. Now let me quickly show you in order to implement Google provider, what all the steps that we are going to cover. So we are going to implement our Google provider in simple 3 steps. In the very first step, we are going to set up our auth.js file in our Next.js project. And everything is documented very well. So we have to add few lines of code and it will be implemented. And second thing that we are going to configure our Google OAuth for our authentication, right? So we will create our client ID and secret and we will implement it in our application. And once user is authenticated, then after that, we will see how we can get the data from the session and implement it in our application, such as username, email, and their profile image. All right, so now let's start. Now, if you see, this is the documentation provided by Next.auth.js. So here, if you see in the documentation, the very first line they have given Next.auth.js is becoming auth.js now. Okay, and whatever the documentation we have on Next.auth.js is going to be moved on auth.js.dev, right? And if you see here, list of all the provider which is being supported by our Next.auth. Here we have several providers like we have Apple, OAuth, Azure ADB2C, and here we have GitHub, GitLab, Google. Here we have Twitter. Most of the popular OAuth providers are being supported by Next.auth.js. And here also we have Facebook. And they have provided the documentation very well for each and every provider, right? So now what we are going to do, we will refer our auth.js documentation. Okay, so now let's move to this documentation. Here they have mentioned as next.auth.js, but now in the new documentation, they mention it auth.js. The whole idea from moving next.auth.js to auth.js is earlier this next.auth was intended to support only for Next application, but after that they decided to support it for other frameworks like Express, Quick, and Svelte, and many more, right? That's why they moved from next.auth to auth.js. Okay, and now from here gets started. Now here in the documentation, if you'll come to the provider, and inside the provider, here you should be having Google. So see here, they have provided the documentation for all the OAuth provider, and here we are having for Google. Just select the Google, and here we have step-by-step configuration in order to implement it. Now let's do it step by step. So first of all, so we are going to create these two variables in our .env file, and after that, we will set up this callback URL once we will configure our OAuth inside our Google. Okay, so now let's add these two variables inside our .env file. So here we should be having our .env file, and inside this, let's add these two variables, right? And we would be adding our Google ID and Google secret shortly once we will configure our OAuth inside our Google. Now the next step, we need to add our provider as Google in our next auth config file. So here, if you go to the auth.ts file, and friends, we have configured already this auth.ts file in one of our earlier session. Now let me quickly show you. So here, if you see, this is the series that we are creating, and if we have this session number, 14, right? See here, this is the session number 14 where we have implemented our next auth.js step by step with our PostgreSQL database. And if you are following this series, then it will be quite easy for you to understand. If not, then I would recommend you to just check out this video first and then come back to our today's session. All right. Now let's come to the point here and add our Google provider inside our auth.ts file. So let's copy this, and inside our auth.ts file, this is our auth.ts file, and here inside our provider, see, this is our provider. So as of now, we have only implemented our credential provider, and here we are going to add our Google provider as well, Google provider. Okay, now we need to import this Google from our next auth provider Google. Place a comma here. So now we have two provider as a Google provider and credential provider. Now the next step, we are not using as of now refresh token, so we will leave this part for now. And inside our callback, here we are going to use this sign in function. So let's use this sign in callback. Here we have our callback, right? So here we have our JWT, and right after JWT, we are going to use our sign in callback. Okay. And we will, for the time being, we will make it type of any. Okay. And we will disable our any type for linting. And that's all the changes we need to do in our auth.ts file. Now the next step, we will enable our Google OAuth provider for our application in our Google Cloud Console. So now let's open our Google Cloud Console. Here, Google Console. So you should go here, console.cloud.google.com, and here, if you have already any existing project, you can select that project. Otherwise, you can create a new project. So go to the project here, select a new project, and here I'm going to create a new project as online shoes store. Okay, and now create. Once your project is created, then you can select your project from here, and here at the dashboard of your selected project, go to this API and services, and at the left side, if you see here, we have a credential. So now we will click on credential, and here we are going to create credential, and we will select our OAuth client ID. Okay, because we are going to add our OAuth provider. So it's giving a message to create a OAuth client ID. You must first configure your consent screen. So now go to the consent screen, and here gets started, and here you can add your app name, online shoes store, and I'll give my supported email ID, KUMAR Programming, and I'll use audience as external. Next. All right, now next, and finally agree. Go to the continue, and finally you can create your consent screen, right? Now if you see here, we are getting a message as OAuth configuration created. Now from here you can create OAuth client, and here create OAuth client ID, right? So we are going to create OAuth client ID, and here we have to select for which type of application we have to create our client ID. So we are going to create client ID for our web application. So select this web application, and here we can give the name of our web application as online shoe store. And here, this is the authorized redirect URI. So here we need to add redirect URL, right? So what all those redirect URLs are there? Here, if you see at the very first step, this is a callback URL. So these callback URL needs to be added here inside our redirect URI, right? So here we are going to add this, and here we are going to add one more, and here we will add our host for our production version. So see here we are deploying our application here. So I'll copy this, our host, and I'll paste it here. Okay. All right. And now the second URL needs to be added as localhost. And simply we have to replace our host here as localhost port 3000, right? Since we are running our application on port 3000. And here we will remove our HTTPS. Right. Now let's create. And if you see here, this is the important thing. Now you will get here your client ID as well as your client secret. Okay. Now we are going to copy this client ID, and we are going to paste it in our .env file. So here we have our .env file, and here we are going to paste it our Google client ID, and also we are going to paste our, this is our client ID. Let's open it once again. And here we have our client secret, right? So let's copy it from here and paste it in our variable. Okay. All right. Now if you come to this overview, here you can see your metrics, that how much traffic you have, and how many number of OAuth user, all those information that you can see over here. So now we have completed our configuration for Google provider as well. Now further we are going to create a server action and our Google sign in button, and we will hook up our action to our Google sign in button. Okay. So here what we will do in our user server action, here we have created function as sign in with credential, and similarly we are going to create another function sign in with Google. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just copy this function and right after I'll paste it. Okay. And sign in user with Google. And here I'll provide this name as sign in with Google. And here we are not required to pass any data. And I'll remove this and I'll remove this return as well. Since once we will do sign in, then internally our auth.js is redirecting to the redirect URL which we have configured inside our Google Auth. Okay, so here we simply need to call this auth sign in function and pass the provider as Google. Okay, and in case of any error, here we will give message authentication failed, please try again. Okay, and that's it. Now our server action is ready. Now we are going to call this server action from our login page. Okay, so at our login page we are going to create a Google sign in button, and from there we will call this sign in with Google function. Now go to our sign in page. So here we have in our app auth, and in sign in here we have credential sign in form, and here we have our sign in button component, right? So similarly, we are going to create another sign in button component as Google sign in button. Okay. So if you see here we have created our button as sign in button, and similarly, we are going to create another button as Google sign in button. Okay. And here I'll remove this use form status because it's not needed over here. Since we are going to use our use transition hook, now remove this, and I'm going to remove this button as well. And here I'm going to use my Google sign in button which already I have created in order to just save our time. So here inside our React fragmentation, I'm going to paste my Google sign in button. Okay, and now here let's implement few things. This loader needs to be imported from our Lucid React, and now let's create this Google sign in function quickly. Now here we will create our Google sign in function const Google sign in equal to async, since we are going to call our server action, right? So here we'll use our fat arrow function, and inside this fat arrow function simply we are going to call our server action await sign in with Google, right? We created a server action as sign in with Google, sign in with Google. Yep, right. And that's it. Okay. And now the next thing is each pending, right? So each pending is coming from our use transition hook. Now let's create our use transition hook as well here. Const we have each pending and start transition, right? And these are coming from our use transition hook, and this use transition hook needs to be imported from React. Use transition, yep, it's already imported. Now we are going to use this. Already we are using this is pending. Now we will use this start transition as well. Here simply we will call this start transition, and inside this we are going to pass a fat arrow function, and inside this fat arrow function we are going to pass this await sign in with Google server action. This would be async. Now our button should be ready. Here I'm using this SVG icon from our icon8s.com. So now let me show you that from where I'm using this icon so that you can also create it. Here icons8.com, and here you can just search for icon. I'm going to search for Google, and simply you will get the icon from here, right? So whatever icon you want to implement, you can just select it, and once you select it and download, you will get the all the format over here: PNG, SVG, PDF, favicon, and SVG. So here I have copied this SVG icon and pasted in my Google sign in button. Okay, now let's save it. Now this Google sign in button component is ready. Now we are going to use this Google sign in button component right after this div, and that's all. Now let's run our application and see if it's working fine. So our application is already running. Now let's see in our browser. Here let's refresh this. Now we should be seeing here a sign in button, Google sign in button. Perfect. Now if you see here, we are able to see our Google sign in button, and once we will click on it, see now we are spinner is also working. since we have already used our use transition hook. Now see, it's asking to choose an account, and here see to continue our online SUI store, this application client name which we have given, and here user has to provide their email ID. So here I have already added my email ID kkyprogramming@gmail.com. Now here see sign in. Now it's signing to our online SUI store application. Okay, now continue. Now it should successfully authenticated and it should redirect to our home page. Now here we got the access denied error, and mostly we get this error whenever our access restricted through our sign in callback or redirect callback, right? So we are using our sign in callback. So now let's check our sign in callback here in our auth.ts file. Here if you see, we are using this sign in callback, right? Here it's returning the verified email, right? That is coming as a true. But if you see here, profile.email ends with @example.com. So it is restricting. Now this is returning false. That's why we are getting access denied error, right? So what we will do here, we will check if we are having email verified, then it returns the value, otherwise returns false from here. Okay. If email is not verified, then we are not going to sign into the user. Okay. Now let's save it, and now let's test it once again. Now let's sign in once again. So now if you see, we have redirected to our home page and user is successfully signed in. See here, user is successfully signed in, and here we are having our email ID from which we have registered, right? Now we need to display the image, since once we logged in, we get the profile image also inside our session information. So we can show the image here as well. So now let me quickly implement our profile image as well. So here in our code, here we have our shared component. So we should be having here component, shared component. So here inside our shared header and user button, right? This user button component we are using. So now we will do some changes over here. Here we are adding the initial name, the first character from the name. Now we are going to check the image as well. So here const profile image, and here we are going to get the image from session.user.image, right? And what we are going to do here inside button, here what I'm going to do here, let me close this explorer for the time being, and here what I'll do, simply we are going to check if we have profile image, then we are going to display profile image, else we are going to display our initial name. Okay, and now here inside our profile image, I'm going to take another div with class absolute and inset 0. Okay, and inside this div I'm going to take image, where I'm going to display my image with source, and I'll pass this source this profile image. Okay, this profile image, and I'll give alt as profile. Also I'll use fill, and class name I'm going to use rounded full and object cover. All right, and now we will close this tag, and here, and this image is not imported, let's import this image. Here let's import this image, import image from next image. Now here we are going to write our initial name. So what I'll do here, I'll take a span with class name as text medium and font medium. Okay, and inside this simply I'm going to write our initial name. Okay, save it. All right, now let's see in our browser. Now we should be see our image as well. Okay, so now here we are getting this, since this Google image is coming from this source, so we need to add this host in our next config file. So now let's go to our next config file. Here we should be having our next config file. This is next config file, right? And here we need to add our host. So what we will do here we are going to add host. All right, still we are getting error. Now let me restart our server. Now let's see it once again. Perfect. Now if you see here, we are able to see our Google profile image as well. Now we need to give some border over here. So now let's add a bit border here to this button. Here border. Okay. Now let's save it and see. Now we should be having a small border over here. Yep, right. Now we are seeing a small border. And from here, you can see our profile name and profile email. Okay. Now also I would like to show you that how the data is getting stored inside our database. So see here, this is our Prisma Studio. And if I refresh this is our user table. So if you see here, this new user created, and here we have email as kkyprogramming@gmail.com. There's password null, right? Because it's getting authenticated to the Google. And here we have role user, and we don't have address as of now. And if you see here, we have our profile image, right? This is the profile image which is being displayed over there, which is coming from the session. And this user is getting stored inside our account. See here, this is our account, right? For this particular user. And this is OIDC, OpenID Connect. And this is our provider, Google provider. And if you want to integrate with multiple other provider like Facebook, GitHub, we can integrate it, and here we would be seeing that the different provider over here, and here we have provider account ID. And since we have not implemented our refresh token, so we didn't get the refresh token. And here we have our access token, which is being generated by the Google. So these information are getting stored inside our database. All right. Now friends, I'll quickly deploy my changes and we will see in our production. Okay. So now let's deploy our changes. Here, let's open a Git bash terminal. Here we have changes on the 5 files. Okay. Now here git status. So we have done the changes in 5 files. Okay. Now let's add all these files. So git add dot. So it's going to add all the files. Now git commit -m and give the message here as session 31 implemented Google Auth. Okay. And now git push. All right. And now we are maintaining each and every session with a separate branch. So now let's create a separate branch for that. So here, first of all, check our commit ID. So git log -one line and the commit ID which we have, this one, right? For the session 31. So what I'm going to do here, git branch feature session 31 and this commit ID. Okay. Now git push origin feature session 31 branch. Okay. Feature session 31. No, something is wrong. Okay. Yep. This feature session 31 / okay. So now we have committed our code inside our master branch, as well as these specific changes are maintained inside our feature session 31 branch. All right. Now it should be quickly deploy in our Vercel environment. Now let's quickly open our Vercel environment. Here, this is our Vercel environment, and we will be able to see our log. So now if you see here, it's building now. Now see if the log from here, it's collecting build trace. It would be quite fast. It's not going to take more than 2 minutes, even less than that. And meanwhile it's deploying, let's do the changes in our environment variable, since we have added 2 new environment variable, right? So here inside our application, inside setting, and here we have our environment variable. See, this is the environment variable. Now quickly we are going to add 2 new environment variable over here as auth Google ID and auth Google secret. Okay. And the value is, this is my Google ID and this is secret. And in your case, it would be different. Okay. Now save it. And once you save it, it's giving message as added environment variable successfully. A new deployment is needed for changes to take effect, right? So redeploy it in production and redeploy. And see here, this session 31 is already being deployed. Now if you see here, so here I'm seeing this status is ready and the branch is 899 BCA and branch is session 31, right? Okay. Now let's see our application, if it's reflecting or not. So this is our production environment. Now click on sign in. Now we should be seeing here. Perfect. Now we are seeing over here our sign in with Google option. Now we are going to sign in. So now here, if you see here, we are getting a access blocked authorization error, right? So now let me show you here inside our configuration. Once we go for the live, here in the audience section, here we have to make our application publish app to the production. Okay. So now this is going to be moved to the production. Now if you see here, this application is now in the production, and here in the data access also, Here we can add and remove our scope. So this is OpenID, and here we are going to use our user profile and user information email, right? So these three information that we are going to use. Now save it. All right. Now let's try it once again. Now sign in. Yeah, perfect. Now if you see here, we are able to sign in with our Google email ID, right? Now we can sign out from here and we can sign in once again. And this is our production environment, right? Now sign in, and here I'm going to sign in with my Google. Yep, it's getting signed in, right? And friends, I have shown that what all kind of errors that we are facing. So might be you would be facing while you are implementing this Google authentication as OAuth provider. But still, if you are facing any issues, please jot down in the below comment section, and I'll try to reply as soon as possible in order to fix your issue. All right, friends. And in our next session, we are going to implement our PayPal payment section. And friends, at the end of this video, if you found this tutorial helpful, do me a favor, like this video to support me and my channel, and subscribe my channel if you haven't already done so far for more technical videos like this, and share this with your fellow developer who might find it useful. And if you really love my work, then consider buying me a coffee to support for more free tutorials. Link is given below in the description. Alright, that's all for the day. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Till then, take care and keep learning.